everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Laila, for introducing me. I just have to say that the last award was Arne Næss Senior, the uncle to the mountain climber. And he was a philosopher, and he believed in helping people who were less fortunate in the Norwegian society. And so when I was told that they want to give me this award that they gave every second year to somebody, I was like, I hadn't heard of that award, you know, but I was very honored to receive it though. Because he said that the book shows and the committee says that you have done further than your work and my job description required of me. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my job and my work though. So I grew up in a family where gender was not the focal point. I grew up with brothers, and I was in the middle of all the brothers, but it was easy to find my spot because I was a handful for my mother. I was climbing the highest trees, you know, than my brothers, and she had to keep me in the line, you know. But now we were told at our house that boys and girls, they could do the same things, they can become whatever they wanted to do. My mom said, you know, you just have to behave, and I want you guys to learn right from wrong, you know, to have just manners, to say it like that, you know. So we were told, you know, and we didn't behave though, which I'm so happy for actually. And when you are a kid, you don't have bias. You don't grow up with that, you learn that when you grow up. Do you remember who you were before somebody told you who you were? It's very important to think about that sometimes. So when I was 12 years old, I told my mom, I want to become a police officer when I become an adult. And she said, of course you can, but you have to listen to your teacher, you know, do your schoolwork, you know, and behave, you know. This was always the lesson our mom taught us. And she taught us to believe in ourselves. You can do whatever you feel you can do, but you have to work for it, and you have to work hard. You know, there's nothing that is too much to ask about, actually. So I'm very happy for that foundation I got. I got a safe upbringing, a good foundation with a lot of love, and I feel I'm so happy that I got that, because after I became a police officer, it really opened my eyes that not everybody has had that in their life, unfortunately. So I believe that a good childhood lasts the whole lifetime. But a lot of us don't have that, people in our society. But even if you are dealt a bad hand, it doesn't have to end like that if somebody helps you and sees you. And this is what I'm going to tell you about though after I started to work in the police force. I started in the police, at the police academy. And in Norway and Sweden and Denmark and Finland, it's 3 years, a bachelor degree, and you go to school, and it's a very good education, I would say. When I was finished, I was driving at the public order department. I worked there for some years. Then I worked with another colleague that is a bit more experienced, which is very good. And the headquarter calls us out to different addresses, you know, go to this and this address. And we police people, we are just human beings like everybody else. We are no different though, but we just choose this profession. So we never knew what was behind the closed doors that we were entering. And you also have to have in mind that the police in Norway, we haven't been armed on our hips before May 2025, and then we had retired. You know, my husband retired June this year. So we have had our guns locked down in the middle of the police seats in the car, and we had to ask for permission actually to use them. So what we had though in our belt was pepper spray, you know, and we had handcuffs, you know, and we had we had to really be good to talk to people. So one time I was presenting for the NYPD, and I was telling them this was in 2012, so we weren't armed, of course. And I told them that we weren't, and they were like, "What? Are you guys crazy?" And I said, "I don't think so, but you want to know what my strongest weapon is? Yes, and they said, is it like this two-hand big weapon? Is bazooka? They were coming with all these different things that I should say yes to. I said, no, it is my mouth. With your words, you can kill people and you can heal them. The way you speak to people, the way you talk to them, and that is for everybody actually, but as a police I really saw that too though, that people will listen to you or they will not. Of course we met a lot of crazy people that we have to pepper spray and put down, you know, but most people know, of course the criminals know that, okay, I did this, you know, so I need to be handcuffed, you know, like on my back, but I always said, put your arms on your back, you know, please, and like police too, we don't have to force those handcuffs very hard, because some people do that, you know, I see that on TV, but that's maybe TV only, you know, like so you get these scars or marks, you can do it gently, you know, you can show people respect, even though they have done wrong things though. We are the authority, but still we can be human beings. So, when I started the police academy, it was 12% police women in the police force. And actually today in America it's 14%, but in Norway now it's more than 50%. But at that time it was a man's world, you know. But it didn't scare me because I knew that the police needed as much women as men. Because half of Norway and actually half of the world consists of women, 50%, and men approximately. So we needed that. So, like I said, it was a hard, steep learning curve, you know, and I would like to tell you a story, the first story that I experienced. I mean, it's a real incident that happened, but that inspired me to write down the stories that became a book when I retired. We were called up to an address, you know, in the outskirts of Oslo. I always worked in Oslo, the capital, for all my 31 years though. So we drove out there and we were told it was domestic disturbance. And that can be anything. Today they are more specific when they give orders like what it is actually, but it could be anything. So we came up there. Actually the door was open. It was 1 o'clock in the morning and the neighbors had called. They live in this big story house, you know, townhouse. And because there was loud music coming from that apartment, you know, and when you live in like apartments and you have neighbors, you have to turn the music down and you can't play as loud as you want, you know, all night long. So when we come in there, the door was open, we always tell really loud, police, you know, so they should know that we're there. So what I saw, you know, like all these stories in my life though, even though I worked through them, you know, and I'm going to tell you more about that though, but they're still tattooed, you know, I can still see them when I'm telling the stories though. What we saw, there were 7 adults laying / sitting on the couches, chairs, in the living room. They were so on drugs, they didn't hear we were coming. There were like trash everywhere, there were a syringe, and there were like beer bottles and liquor bottles everywhere, and trash and cigarette butts and everything on the floor there. So we came in there, somebody heard us. Suddenly there comes a little girl from one of the bedrooms, she's about 2 years old, crawling over all this trash, straight over to me, and she just went up and held her on my knee and she said, thirsty. Oh, my heart just, my mommy heart, I was like, wow. So I grabbed the little girl up and we went to the kitchen. I was going to give her a drink, and the kitchen was like, it was a bomb, you know, it was like trash everywhere, and nobody has done the dishes for I don't know how long. So I found a glass and I rinsed it, and I gave it to her, and she grabbed it with both of her hands and she drank it, and she said more. And she drank it again, and then there was a cracker package with crackers there, and she pointed at it, and she was 2-ish, so I gave her one in each hand and figured out she can eat that. And my colleague has already called for reinforcements, you know, the CPS was on the way, because always when there are kids, you know, in the picture, We always call the CPS, Children's Protection Service,
Yeah.
and others to assist us, because there were so many adults sitting there, you know, and they were all drunk. They didn't even notice we were there though. While the little girl was sitting on my arm, she said, "Little brother," and she pointed at another room. And my heart sunk again, you know, like I got goosebumps, you know, and we went in there. There was this little baby laying in a cot, maybe 5 months old, and you could tell he's been crying and crying, because you could see the marks on his face, but he stopped crying because nobody came anyway. And this is the baby's way of telling they are in need, you know, to cry when they're little. But he was so used to nobody came, so he just quit crying. And I was looking at him, you know, trying to pet his little chin, you know. He never looked at me. I could never get his eyes looking at me. So I gave a little girl to my colleague, and I picked him up, and he was, he was full of feces, and he smelled, and he's been throwing up, and he was just stinking, you know, and he hasn't been changed for I don't know how long. So I took him to the bathroom, and the bathroom was a mess like all the other rooms, but I found a clean diaper, and I found an outfit. It wasn't clean, but it was better than what he had on, you know, and I changed him and rinsed him under the sink, and I had never seen a little butt as sore as his, you know, and I didn't find anything, creams or anything to put on, and my heart, I was so much crying inside though. But when you are working, you have to be strong, you have to do things you have to do. This is what I mean, that we are human beings, that you can't break down and cry there. So I changed him, and when the CPS and the police came, I told the lady at the CPS, this little guy needs to see a doctor for his butt, you know, because it's so sore. And the kids were taken to the CPS, and all the adults, they were handcuffs and taken down to prison in Oslo, and custody first, of course. So actually, this is my first story, and what I did though, to sort of work through all these stories, through all the 3 decades that I was in the police force, I had 20 minutes to drive home. So when I was finished with all the report writing, everything, and went up to my car, I just cried my eyes out, you know, all the way home to get this out of my system, you know. And I started to write down my stories, because I thought, Norway needs to know about this, you know, because I didn't know it was so much misery in Norway, you know, because everyone thinks everything is fine now, but you find all this in, I think, in all societies. So I wrote down the stories, and in Norway, I don't know how it is here though, but kids who have struggled, been through CPS their whole life, or been to orphanages, and even don't make it, they are called dandelion children in Norway. But I was thinking dandelion is a weed, you know, like that you pull up. These kids deserve to be named better. So I called the book in the beginning Asphalt Lilies, because they've been walking on hard asphalt, and they are lilies, you know, they are as much worth as you and I. So this is my actually first meeting with Norway, and the things that happens though. So when I've experienced all the suffering, all the misery, sexual abuse, substance abuse, and what children were growing up under these terrible conditions, my moral compass starting to work crazy, and I thought I have to do more than my job description requires of me. You know, these people need help, and these people, they don't have anybody to turn to but the CPS, you know. And in 1993, I was shot by a crazy person, but I'm still here, so I'm alive. So I remember after that incident, I was thinking, if I died that day, in my family, there are so many resource people, you know, like grandparents, their father, aunts and uncles that could have taken care of my brothers. I mean, my sons, you know, they would have grown up with loving people around them. Even though I'm so happy that I didn't die from them. But these people that I'm telling you about, they don't have any. Some of them are the 3rd generation with either alcohol or drug substance use, you know. They don't have anybody to turn to. So I started to reach out my hand to these kids, you know, and started to contact them. Some of them lived in orphanages, I was allowed to do that, and some of them had parents who were, like one of the kids that I still am in contact with, her mother was prostitute in Oslo, and she was very pretty when I saw her, because when you start that life, you are pretty, but very soon you don't look that pretty after you use drugs and you are selling your body. So I talked to her, because I worked with that for a while, you know, with the prostitutes, and I always went out of the police car talking to each girl. And in the 1990s, there were only Norwegian women there. You know, now that you don't find anybody else than East European, you know, but it's actually, you hardly don't see them because they go indoors. And it's, we had a rule in Norway, it became 10 years after Sweden that it was illegal to buy sex, you know, from women. So we got that in 2009, that rule in Norway, and in Sweden 10 years before. And she told me that she had a kid, and that kid was in the orphanage because she was a heroin addict, and she could never go and see her kid without, she had to be totally sober, which she could never be, because she said life would be so hard if I was sober, you know, then all the reality just hits in, you know. So she said, could you go with me? Because if I go with one person to see my daughter, then I am allowed. And I said yes. So we went to see this little girl, and they picked her up one Sunday. And my kids were little too, so I brought balls and a little bike and stuff so that she could play with. And the little girl stood there, you know, waiting, blonde hair, big blue eyes, and she was 5 years old then. And so we took her out to the park and we played, and the mother, she wasn't participating much, but she was happy, so I was playing with the girl, you know. And she didn't speak one word with me at all. And we did this every 5th Sunday, and she never spoke. She could speak, but she never spoke. But she told me later why. Because from she was 1 year old, she's been in the orphanage, and you know, as a baby, it's very normal. You are getting attached to. I mean, our babies are getting attached to us as parents, as grandparents. They need to have that stability. And when you are in the orphanage, there are so many people. And she said they just quit. You know, new people came and went. You know, all the time. Not everybody's were there for a long time, so I stopped trusting people. But when she was 6 years old, I knew she had her birthday because her mom told me. So I brought her a little present. So I just bent down like this, and I said her name, and I said, happy birthday, you are such a pretty girl, you know, this is all yours, you know, and you are the best girl. And I was shocked because she started to speak to me. I didn't expect that. And she said, and she looked me straight in the eyes, and she said, Kim, will you be there for me when I'm an adult also? Like all the way? And those words hit you, you know, because non-normal 6-year-olds say that because they don't need to, because they are in a healthy family. And I was thinking, dear God, what do I answer? I don't want to be like just all the others who said yes, of course, you know. So I said, I'm going to do my very best. And this is 29 years ago, and we still are in contact, and she's doing very well. And her mother is still a drug addict, you know, and her father, but she doesn't have contact with them. And she's doing good, and she doesn't use any drugs. And this is what I mean. It goes to show that if one person is there for you, to help you, to lend you a hand, everything can be changed, you know, for the better. Because her grandparents were drug addicts, her parents were, and there were alcoholism, you know, in generations back there. So they have nobody to turn to. And a lot of people I spoke to when I was working, they said, I have no hope, you know, because everybody has left me, abandoned me, and I'm thrown under the bus, you know. And a lot of people too I spoke to, they had very low self-esteem, you know, because when nobody helps you to get your spirit up, nobody praises you when you come home from school with a good test or make a drawing that is nice when you're little, you know, you're not used to getting that, you know, it's not easy to get a high self-esteem. So I try to build that on these people, and I say to them, no matter what people have told you, you know, bad things, you know, or what you have said to yourself alone in the mirror, you know, bad things about yourself. Don't believe it. You can do it, you know, and if people have thrown you under the bus, you can choose to lay there, but I mean, there's no need to do that. You know, here's my hand, I'll drag you up, and you can become the driver of your own bus, or in your own life, you know, but you just need help, you know. So a lot of these people got help to a lot of them had not going, they have a lot of holes, you know, from the school days. They haven't been enough to schools and stuff, and like I knew a lot of people too, you know, so they got a lot of help though. And I think to walk an extra mile with people, you know, and see that now, decades later, it still works, you know. So and you don't need to be a police person to do this, because all of us meet people all the time in some ways in our job or in our daily life. So we can all be that one that helps. And I say to people that tell me, I have lost all hope in life. There is nothing more I can hope for. And what I do then, there is one woman I'm going to tell you about, and to her I said, here, she sat in front of me like this in my office, you know, giving her statement about her husband who hit her and raped her every day, and she had a bad life. I said, take my hands, and she gave it to me, and she said, look at me. I have enough hope for the both of us. I'll lend you my hope, and you can have it as long as you want it. So when you have your own hope, I promise it will be better. You give it back to me. Then I give it to somebody else who needs it, because that's more of a commitment, you know. We have to work a little bit to get that hope, you know. And I have had people calling me 5 years later, you know, like this lady that I would like to tell you about, though. She called me 5 years later and she said, do you remember me, Kim? And I said, yes, I do, because I still had her number on my phone. And I said, how are you? How are the kids? Because I helped her, so her husband became in prison, and she and her kids had to get a new identity and moved somewhere else in Norway, so nobody could find them. Because even though her husband was in prison, her friends in Oslo and from the same country where they came from, they were asylum seekers, and her family from her country of origin, they called her and said, it's your fault that your husband is in prison, you know, if you haven't went to the police, you know, poor man. And she was like abusing the whole family. 5 years ago, I have got my own now. You know, it warms your heart. And she said, and I'm almost done with my education. She wanted to become a teacher, and she had just some months left, you know. And all the kids were doing good. They were going to school, and the oldest were doing education, you know. And so I see it goes to show that it helps, you know, to help people in their need, though, and do a little different things for them so they can get back on their feet, though. So I say that I have 2 biological sons, and I have like lots of non-biological kids, you know. But the love is the same, though. People are people. So, so that is very important, to offer hope, give guidance, and give people a hand to hold on to, because that is often enough for people to go further on, though. Do you want to hear another story?
Yeah.
Okay. We were working in civilian clothes in the late night. In downtown Oslo by the train station, Oslo Central Station, but in the early days it was called Østbanen, because I started to work in 1990. So one of these security guards came over to us and he said, there are some noises down in one of the toilet booths down there, and the door is locked, and I knock on the door and nobody answers, but I hear there are somebody in there, can you please help me? So we went after him. It was this the steps were like this, you know, and in the downstairs in the basement were the toilets. You knocked on the door, nobody opened, and I had this Swiss Army knife, so they are easy to open those booths. And like I told you earlier, you're not prepared for what you meet. On the toilet bowl sits a lady, she in her bra, and she has a pink belt that is sort of tightened around her overarm, and she has a needle in her arm and a syringe, and her head is tilted to one side. And we ran over there and feel if there's some pulse, and if she's alive, and we call 911. No pulse, and the ambulance is coming, and it's quite little that boots, you know, and on the floor there, it's her winter coat, you know, and it just sits there on the floor. Suddenly I see it's moving under that coat, you know, and I was thinking, is it a dog? Is it a rat? You know, and I lift it up. There sits a 3-year-old little girl crying, peed out her pants, scared to death, you know, and she's trying to reach her mom, and she says, "Mommy, Mommy, don't let it take me away from you." You know, that's what I said, this is just horrible things you experience, you know. And I lift up the girl, she's ice cold, because this is in the winter time, and she sat there and she peed in her pants. I don't know how long she's been there at all, with her mom dead, you know, beside her. So the police came, the ambulance came, you know, and I took her with me, and she was hitting me, scratching me. She was so mad, you know, and she wanted her mama. And we took her down to the CPS, you know, and your mama heart bleeds, you know, I tell you, when you see these kids go. So, I took her down there, and she never calmed down at all, you know. So, I was thinking of this when I was driving home, you know, I was so sad, you know, and a couple of weeks later, we went down there with some other kids that we found, you know, to the, because there's this main station for the Children's Protection Service that you only can, in the daytime there are offices all over Oslo, but in the night there is one big office in Oslo when things happen at night and the evenings that we go to. So the same lady was there again 2 weeks later, after I delivered this little girl that her mom died of an overdose in that toilet booth. And I said, I've been thinking of that little girl, do you know anything more about her? And she said, you know what, we've been working hard on that. We don't find her in any register. I think the mom probably had her, you know, under the radar, maybe with a client, a hooker client. We don't know who she was. We knew the name of the mom, but she didn't have any next of kin alive. They were died of alcoholism and overdose, you know, so they just gave her a name. Well, she knew her name though. She told them her first name, she didn't know her last name. Not many 3-year-olds know all this, you know, 2 or 3-year-olds. And gave her a new date of birth, you know. And I really prayed to God that she was gonna come to the best foster care ever, because she deserved that. So, yeah. In Oslo, well, in Norway, actually, in all of Europe, in the mid of 1990s, the Hells Angels, Bandidos, Outlaws, and Coffin Cheaters, and all these criminal motorcycle gangs, they came to Europe. They're trying to make chapters there. I was asked by my boss, and he said, do you have the driver's license for heavy motorbike? I said yes. So I was chosen with 3 other, just me, I was the only lady though in that group. It was very exciting though. We were driving up to all these men, trying to avoid them to sort of get a chapter, like they call it, you know, in Oslo. But they made it though. But anyway though, we made a lot of fuss for them, you know, we arrested them, you know, because, you know, and they had a hard time seeing me as a lady first, driving in Harley Davidson. And some of them were really old-fashioned, you know, I think that women should be at home, just staying at the kitchen counter, you know. And the leader said to me one time, and I was driving the Harley Davidson, and you have this big helmet, so I didn't see who was driving first, and I had my colleague who was sitting back, you know, on the seat. And we took the helmets off. He said, "What?" He said, "You are driving?" You know, the laws in Norway with gender equality has gone so too far, you know. You drive a Harley Davidson, you are a police. I mean, you even have the audacity to drive a Harley Davidson. And I said, I have a driver's license too, because he hadn't, you know, because a lot of these men, they were criminals, so they didn't have a driver's license at all, because the police took it from them. The different reasons, you know, but they draw anyway, because they said we drive as well with or without the driver's license. That's why they were in trouble like all the time though. But even these people, have a soft heart, you know, like, or I would say have a wounded heart, you know, from broken lives, you know. Because I know that after working in the police force for a while though, these guys put on the vest, you know, with Hells Angels, you know, and some of them are probationary, they are doing all the dirty work to become fully members, you know, and they have long hair, tattoos, you know, some of them big, walking like this, you know. So, but I always believe in like looking up the person that looks the worst, I mean the most scariest, if you see what I mean though, because I think they have the most to carry inside, because you sort of hide behind this, the shield, you know, the vest that you put on, you know. So, and I always like to small talk with people, because we get a lot of information as a police then. So I talked to people and they said, next Friday we're going to have this big party. And people are, they say the brothers from South Europe and other places are coming, you know. And then we were there, of course, and I was watching, even though I knew we were police, we were having civilian clothes, I was watching a new guy that I'd never seen before, very tall and very big, and he spoke like he owned the world, you know, and when other people were speaking, he just overruled them, sort of spoke, you know, like didn't wait for his turn though. So I was thinking, he's interesting. So then I saw he talked to one of the probationary guys, the one that runs around and do all the work, you know, cleans toilets inside there and give them drinks, you know, and all that, you know. And a little later, that guy came back to him with a little bag, and I saw it was some white powder in it. So I ran over there, you know, and I had my police badge under my shirt, you know. So I just pulled it out and I said police, you know, showed him, and he had a beer bottle in the other hand, and I saw he put that little plastic bag with the drugs inside in the neck of the bottle. So I jumped up because he was so tall, you know, and I said, "Police, you're arrested." And he just turned around, you know, looked at me, and he grabbed my other arm and lifted me up from the ground.
Oh my word.
And I said, put me down, I'm the police, you know. And I was thinking, then this should be on the movie, and now my book will be a TV series, I tell you. So my colleagues came, they were a little, I saw that they've been smiling a little bit, because that scene must have been really funny. So I took him back to the police station, you know, and I was interviewing him, you know, because it was drugs, you know, that we found there, and he was so hating me so much, you know. So he sat above me, and I sat here, and he was so long, so he did it on purpose, though. He just put his legs under my chair, you know, like so I should really feel that he was there, you know, and he was trying to scare me. And you know, when I started in the police force in 1990, we had typewriters. And when I tell my grandkids that, they say, "Granny, did you live in dinosaurs running around?" I said, "No, almost." So we just got a computer at that time, and I was quite new, you know, with that program. So I was thinking, okay, I hope I do this right, you know, and I knew that the guy in front of me, he would not be understanding if I tell him, like, I'm a rockin', we're doing this, you know, I'm new to this. So I didn't tell him, I just hoped for the best and started. And he sat there with his arms on his big belly, you know. Oh, he said, "I'm not telling you anything, little girl. I know you can keep me for 4 hours, and that's all." And he was right, because he's been in there many times, so he knew the rules if I didn't have anything on him. So I started, and I said, and in Norway, you have to say your name, where you live, and when you're born, and if you lie about that, you could come to prison just because of that, you know, that you have to say the truth, you know, and he knew that. And he said, "I'm just going to say my name and when I'm born, you know, and I'm not working, you know, because most of them didn't, you know." So he said his birthday. And I looked at the calendar that I have on my table, and I said, "It's your birthday today." So he stood up, and I sang, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you." And I didn't know where it started. It was like pushing a button. He's starting to cry. And snot and tears, and he cried like a baby, so I had to run and get some Kleenex to him. And I went to pet his shoulder just to comfort him, but I wasn't sure. I just did a little bit, you know, because he was real, like anti-Kim, he didn't like the police. And he cried, and then he was making a blog in this paper, and I thought this they can hear far up in the main street in Oslo, because that was the loudest I ever heard of. And I said, what happened? I said, did I sing, couldn't I carry a tune in a bucket? Yes, you could, that was beautiful, but you don't know my story. He said, no, I don't. I said, so as a police, you have many hats on when you are in there. I had the police hat first, and then I had the compassion hat on, you know, like being a human fellow. And he said, I'm going to give you, the report is going to be very easy. It was my drug. And I said, I know that, I said. So we did it really quick, but we were in there more than 2 hours, because then he told me his story. Like I said, though, everybody is carrying something, you know. And he told me about growing up with his parents, and were alcoholics, because this was a while ago. And the first years of his life, he could live with his grandma. And that was the best years, till he was 10 years old. And his grandma made the nicest birthday cakes, 3 layers, you know, with chocolate, you know, and all that, you know. And she died of a heart arrest on his birthday when he was 10 years old. And then he was sent to an orphanage, and then later to like boys' homes, you know, and he peed his bed, you know, and he was dyslexic, so he had a lot of trouble. And he decided at that time, when his grandma died, nobody should ever in his life sing his birthday song for him, then he should knock them down. I didn't know that, you know. And his teachers at school tried to sing, and he gave them a black eye and a fat lip, so everybody stopped singing for him. And he said, you did it, you weren't even scared. And I said, but I didn't know. I said, you had your birthday. So that opened the door for him, you know, him and I, though, to get connected. And he said, I'll tell you everything about Hells Angels, what we're doing, you know. So we got lots of information, we made lots of arrests, you know. But we kept that secret, you know, so that was him. But when I was walking him out, you know, to the door, there's a security guard in the police station that walks in the next stairs down to get out. He said, come here. And he whispered to me, this was in the 90s though, can you please send me a birthday card, you know, on my birthday? Because I haven't had that since my grandma died. And I said, of course I will. And I did that, you know, for many years. And then it was normal that everybody had their own mobile. I just text him. So he has his birthday next month, so I'm going to do that, you know. 2 times in these almost 30 years, I forgot. I was either abroad or I forgot it. And he scolded me, calling me in the night, and he said, do you know that you ruined my whole day? And I said, I'm so sorry, and we became friends again. So after that, I have his kids. He had his own kids of his own that the CPS took from his family a long time ago. His wife then committed suicide after the kids were taken away. So now I'm helping his grandkids to get a better life, you know, because I told his daughter-in-law, they weren't married though, but I called her that, you have to break this cycle of like the generations, because she was growing up too with drug addict parents, alcoholic grandparents and all that, you know, because that circle has to be broken to get away from that, you know. So what I did though, a lot of these people are on benefits, you know, they have lots of issues and stuff, so, and they don't get much. So I helped her to get a tiny apartment, but when you live like in a better place of Oslo, a better address, then the kids are entitled to go to schools that sort of belong to the address though. So her boy is doing terrific. He's so good, you know, and he calls me Police Kim. I've been there since he was born, you know, and her mom, she didn't like me first though, because she's scared of the police. So when he was born, my grandkids had grown out of a lot of baby stuff, so I said I can bring a lot of things though, but I have girls though, grandkids, but I just pulled out some of the pink stuff, and there was much, you know, that boys can use when they're babies too though, so I came with 2 bags to her, and her mom said, you have the CPS hanging on your door and now you invite the police, are you crazy? The mom said to this girl, no, but she's a good police, she's helping. I don't believe that, the mom said. So the mom went, you know, when I came in with all the clothes, you know, and after a while I showed them that I wasn't there to arrest, I was just there to help, you know. So no, we are going on every Christmas, so the mom is coming too though. We're going out to eat, you know, for Christmas and for the kids' birthday. So yeah, this goes to show that to give people an extra chance in life and help those who can't help themselves, that gives results. So I don't know how long I've been speaking, because
I think you've done a wonderful job.
yeah, do I have a little more time?
I think maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay, 5 more minutes, okay. I've been traveling around the world because I started on minority work. Like Laila said, in Oslo, I understood that a lot of the immigrant and asylum seekers, the ladies, they didn't speak our language, they didn't work. So I was speaking to the ladies and I said, how long you lived in Norway? And some had lived 5 years, 10 years. One lady had lived 38 years and she didn't know our language, and I thought that is a shame. Somebody needs to do something with that. But then I realized that somebody is yourself. So I went to the bosses on the crime prevention department and I said, I want to work with a female minority population in Oslo. And he said, nobody has ever done that. And I said, that's why I'm going to do it. And at the same time I started at university, so I learned Arabic. Because I was going to show them if I can learn Arabic, as I was 50 around that year at that time, and I said, then you can learn Norwegian. So actually it was a hard and painstaking work. I knocked on all the mosques, all the NGOs for 4 months before somebody opened, because they were scared of the police from their home places where they came from. You know, they didn't dare to let the police in. So I had to show that the police in Norway, we are different. We don't rape people. We don't hit people. We don't steal their money. They were used to that. You know, we are not corrupt. So I managed. I came in to all doors open after long story. And they allowed me to bring their teenage girls on weekend trips, you know. I got all the good stories, you know, and I managed to help all these ladies that had trouble, that grew up, that lived with violent husbands in toxic relationships, you know. I said all violence is banned in Norway. You know, there is gender equality, gender rights. You should have your own bank card and your own bank account and all that, you know, that they weren't used to. So the men hated me, so I couldn't be on the yellow pages. I had to live with a secret address for many, many years because they gave me threats, you know. But I'm still here. So, but it was so worth it, though. So this is the Arnes Prize, which I was reading. I was actually this is Egypt. I was talking to the League of Arab States. I was actually asked to talk to all the Arab leaders. After my book was released, though, I got this note, this letter from the royal family too, though. Thank you for your book. And first time I got that, you know. So this is in Canada, Calgary. I was talking on a conference there for RCMP. This is in Africa, when I worked for UN Women, teaching the police leaders in Africa, Ethiopia. My husband says, find one person that doesn't fit in there. And it was so humid, so my hair wasn't growing up instead of... Yeah, so these are some of the girls, police girls there. I took them to the gym, so we went together. So, I mean, people are people wherever you are, and I'm so happy that I get, this is in, where was that? Yeah, actually Egypt, that too though, but also been to the former Soviet Union a lot. This is from Operation for Security or Cooperation Europe. It's an organization, they invite me to speak for them. So, when my book was released, it's, Alaska, I was there too. When my book was released after I stopped working, it was like a success in Norway, and it's owned up by a TV company that did it right away, and now this is actually with the Aborigines when I was in Australia. So I'm looking for, so maybe some of you know though, I always have somebody that helps me to find an American publisher or an English-speaking publisher to release my book here, you know, The Police Heart, because that opens more door. Norway is only 5 million people, very little language compared to English. But I don't hope I spoke too much now, I still have more, but you know, it's like putting on $1 and you get for